Hi, guys. Okay, today we're going to talk about California as an agricultural power and how that all happened. So, I want to ask you first, what does California look like to you? So, when you picture California in your head, what does that picture look like? I'm guessing some of you are thinking like this, with some beaches, some palm trees. That's a good one. Or like this, the Hollywood sign, and maybe Hollywood or something like that. Or like this, San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge. Maybe even these characters. This would be Disneyland. Maybe that's what comes to mind when you think of California. I would bet most of you did not think of pictures like this. Or like this. Or like that. Or that. But all four of those pictures are from California. So since we live in Southern California, we don't see much of that stuff. This is from different parts of California. But even when you're thinking, people outside of California are thinking what California looks like, they usually are picturing beaches, Hollywood, and possibly Disneyland. Most people aren't thinking of pictures like these. So where were those pictures from and how did it get to be like that? So let's find out. So this right here is a topographical map of California. Okay, so you can see in here, this is all the desert area. And then in here, where it's all green, this area right here is called the Central Valley. And this is all very, very fertile land. So we can see that inside this box is where the gold rush happened. So that's what this square is over here. That's what this box is. So we can see along this little edge right here is where the gold rush happened. So there's LaPorte, there's Grass Valley, Jamestown is down here a little bit. So this is all where the gold rush happened. Okay, so you have to imagine in 1849, when everybody came to California, they're not coming down here to Southern California. They're coming up to Northern and Central California. Okay, so let's see what else happened. So before the gold rush in 1848, California had about 157,000 people, which is not a lot considering what a big state it is. Now we also have to keep in mind that 150,000 of those were Native Americans. So there were really only 7,000 people in California that were not part of a Native American tribe. That's not a lot at all. Okay. And then the gold rush happened in 1849, and it brought over 300,000 more people to California. That's almost double the people. It brought 2 times more people than were already here. Okay, so that's a huge population boom. And then something else happened. In 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed. So we know from previous lessons that that made it a lot easier and safer for people to cross the country. Okay, so remember Manifest Destiny, and everybody was starting to explore and move out of the East Coast, the east side of the United States, and we're coming to California. So by 1900, there were 1,485,053 people living in California. That's a lot of people, and that's a huge difference in just 52 years. So then we need to figure out, what are they going to eat? So all these people have come here, and the Native Americans had a pretty good science down to how to grow things, but they were growing stuff for themselves. And then remember, when the railroad came, they were forced to live on reservations, and there was a lot of fighting between the Native Americans and the non-Native Americans. So when people were coming, they didn't know what to do. So they had to figure out how they were going to feed everybody. So we need to talk a little bit about supply and demand. So the supply is the amount of stuff that you have, and the demand is the amount of stuff that you need. So what happens to prices when there is a high demand and a low supply? So if everybody wants this certain video game and there's only maybe 100 copies of it, what's going to happen? People are going to want it so bad, they're going to be willing to pay more for it. So that's what was happening with farming. So originally, farmers were growing food for just their families, just to survive their own little family. Then what happened is there was no food for anybody. People were willing to pay a lot of money. So farmers began to grow crops to sell them. So then instead of it just being growing food for them to live, now it becomes a huge business. Okay. So, and then with help from the railroad, farmers were able to export their crops across the United States. So now not only were they selling them to the new people in California, they were able to sell them all over the country. So that by exporting on the railroad. Okay, so these fertile valleys, remember the picture I showed you of the Central Valley, had a long growing season. Because of the weather in California, we can grow things all year round. Now, if you think of other states where it's colder, they're not able to grow things all year round. But California has such great weather that we are. So it was perfect for growing wheat. So you can see by this graph over here, in 1850, we were producing very many bushels of wheat. This is the number of bushels over here. And by 1890, that's just 40 years, we were up to 40 million bushels of wheat. So again, a huge boom. So by 1873 even, so even in here, we became the number one producer of wheat in the United States. So when things like this happen, people are excited for new opportunities, but sometimes bad things happen. So one of the major things that happened during this time was the Muscle Slough conflict. So we know from previous lessons that the railroad companies owned a large portion of land in California. So in this area called Muscle Slough in the Central Valley, the Central Pacific Railroad came in and offered land to farmers at $2.50 per acre. And they allowed them to settle before the sale was completed. So farmers built irrigation systems, they plowed the land, and they planted crops. They were great. Before the sale was completed, the railroad company changed their minds and raised the price of the land from $17. It went from some of the plots of land were $17 an acre, all the way up to $40 an acre, which is a huge jump from the $2.50. So as you can imagine, the farmers were pretty upset. So there was a community meeting, fighting broke out, and there was shooting, 7 people died, and then the railroad ended up taking over the land. So all those farmers were out of land, even though they had already paid for it. So that's a major conflict in California. So another part of this agricultural boom was the citrus rush. So it's considered the second gold rush, which is citrus. So again, because of the warm climate in Southern California now, it's perfect for growing citrus fruits. So during the winter, Washington navel oranges ripen. And then during the summer, Valencia oranges ripen. So it keeps a whole year-round crop growing. So it was really good for Southern California. And then again, by the 1890s, California was the nation's main producer of citrus fruits. Okay. This leads to another big part of California's history is the citrus labels. So companies packaging citrus began labeling their boxes in 1885 with these really fancy, pretty, colorful labels to label where they came from. So you can see there's Riverside oranges on this one, Rose brand oranges, Fontana Boy oranges, and Mission. That's one from Riverside too. So the labels identified where the citrus was grown and packaged, and the oranges were considered a delicacy. So the labels brought more money at auction. So it made each brand stand out from the others. So I want you to go, after you're finished watching this, go in and take the quiz. You have all the information in this video that you need for the quiz, and I'll post it in there. And then you should be all good. If you have any questions, come and find me. Thanks. Bye.